Good. Welcome everyone to the 2023-2025 ESF Focused Support Grant webinar. Today is March 30th, 2023. And we are happy to have you join us to learn a little bit more about this grant program and the application process. So for this afternoon, we will have a few things on our agenda. We'll chat just a second about how to engage with us as presenters. We'll do an overview of the grant itself, talk about the application pieces through a review. We'll discuss the application scoring process. I'll give a few notes about budget and use of funds. And then we'll talk a little bit about grant timelines. And I also expect us to have a little bit of time at the end for any additional questions that you may have about this process. During this presentation, you have access to the Q&A feature. Please use that to submit some questions to us throughout the program. If we're able to answer them live, we absolutely will. If not, that is a way for us to capture those questions as part of an FAQ once this webinar is complete, and add those to the currently posted FAQ. As you'll see, Jeff is posting the deck and the links in the chat for everyone, so please access those as well as we move through this presentation. So let's get started with a grant overview. So we are here to discuss the 2023-2025 ESF Focused Support Grant. This grant program is open to all campuses within the state of Texas that are Title I served and are a 2022 federally identified campus. That means they have one of three federal identification labels: comprehensive support and improvement, additional targeted, or targeted support and improvement. This grant program is running as an LOI competition grant. That means that it is not discretionary. If you apply, you will go through a rank scoring process and be awarded based on your application questions. There are approximately 1,700 eligible campuses within the state of Texas. This grant program will award 300 campuses. So there will be a discrepancy between how many awards are issued and how many eligible campuses are available in this program. This grant is a 2-year cycle. So we are awarding in 2023. This grant program will run through 2 full school years, 2023-2024 and 2024-2025. We are expecting grant awards to be $100,000 per campus, and that funding will come on a single NOTGA for total grant for funds to be leveraged over the 2-year cycle. So as I said, that's school year 23-24 and school year 24-25. The purpose of this grant program is to support the applicant with school level improvement efforts, begin and or continue engagement in the effective schools framework process, and strengthens campus systems, build staff capacity, and of course, improve outcomes for these schools. And you'll see here the ESF aligned visual about the critical pieces of the effective schools framework. The ESF Focused Support Grant will have some general requirements. Generally, this grant will be grantees will be required to participate in all aspects of the effective schools framework. That includes identifying the campus needs, planning for support throughout the grant program, and implementation and monitoring of the grant plan throughout the process. In addition to those general requirements, grantees will also be required to participate in an ESF Diagnostic. That is the planning part of the ESF kind of cycle. If the campus hasn't engaged in a diagnostic in the last 3 years, we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a few slides. Campuses and districts will also be required to develop an ESF aligned targeted improvement plan. That's a TIP. Will be required to participate in ESF aligned trainings. Funding report submissions and progress update submissions are a required component of this grant. Partnership with either an ESC or external VIP. The LEA is also required to provide grant funding allocation information directly to the DCSI and campus leadership. So the 3-year ESF diagnostic process. Every 3 years, as part of the ESF process, we require grantees to go through a formal diagnostic. So as you see on this kind of cycle here, if a diagnostic was conducted for an eligible campus in spring 2021, that means that their first year of implementation of those diagnostic results was in school year 21-22. Year 2 of implementation is this school year 22-23. Year 3 of implementation will be next year 23-24, which will mean that that campus will be required to have a diagnostic again in the spring of 2024. If a campus has had a diagnostic prior to 2021, they will be required to participate in a diagnostic in spring of 2024 as well. As a note, the diagnostic is being updated over the summer for to align to the new iteration of the ESF process. That ESF diagnostic could include information from stakeholders, including parents and students. More will be shared about that diagnostic updated process through the Division of School Improvement in the coming months as that gets finalized. In addition to these general requirements, this grant program has 2 pathways, and there are specific requirements for the pathway participation by campuses within this grant program. Pathway 1 within the grant program includes Education Service Center vetted improvement programs. There's a couple of links here. TIL is one of the largest ESC VIP providers, and that link is here for everyone. There are a number of other ESC approved VIPs that you can find on the vetted program list with the second link here. The TIL information is also located on this ESF vetted improvement program list. Requirements for participation in the Pathway 1 will include, but are not limited to, campus instructional leaders and principal supervisors participating in face-to-face professional development, implementation support, and one-on-one coaching. Pathway 2 for this program is the external vetted improvement program. A variety of external VIPs are approved for use through the ESF, also on this ESF website. Requirements will include, but are not limited to, participation for campus instructional leaders and principal supervisors that include face-to-face professional development, implementation support, and one-on-one coaching, as well as other specific VIP requirements. So let's chat a little bit about the application itself and the process of review. So as we've shared, this 2023-2025 ESF-Focused support grant is open to all Title I served campuses with a federal identification in 2022. That includes comprehensive targeted and additional targeted. As part of the application process, the campus and LEA will select a pathway for which to apply, either Pathway 1 with a partnership with an ESC, Education Service Center VIP, or Pathway 2 for partnership with an external VIP. External VIPs are managed by outside vendors, private organizations. So just want to make that clarity point as well. As part of the application itself, all LEAs will complete several portions of this application. Application Part 1. This is a PDF application. That means that it is found on the Grants Opportunities webpage and not in the TEAL system that often discretionary grants are applied for in. Application Part 1 is a PDF. It is a traditional Part 1 application that might be familiar to you or your LEA. This Part 1 will have narrative questions centered around the LEA district support. There are 3 components there. That includes a summary of the program that you intend to initiate, another section with goals, objectives, strategies, performance, and evaluation of the program, and then a budget narrative, how you will expend the funds on awarded campuses. Each applicant LEA district or charter campus will submit 1 application Part 1. So regardless of how many campuses are eligible or that the LEA is applying on behalf of, the entire district will submit one application, part one. We suggest that this portion of the application is completed by the DCSI, superintendent, and district staff, because it will be district opportunities to support the campuses that are engaged in this work. Application part two is the budget workbook. That is an Excel document. Application part two is a traditional part two budget summary, which includes tabs for each budget object code: 6100 payroll, 6200 professional contract services, 6300 supplies, materials, other operating costs, and capital outlay. Each applicant, LEA, district, or charter will submit one part two Excel budget. So for every applicant campus, we will roll up the total award into a single Excel budget spreadsheet for the LEA. I want to note here that during the negotiation process, adjustments will be made to application part two budget based on the final number of awarded campuses. I'm making this note because, as we'll talk about in a little bit, campuses will be ranked and scored individually, and an LEA may apply for a certain number of campuses, but be awarded fewer than their applicant number of campuses. For example, if an LEA applies for 5 campuses, the 5 campuses move through the rank and scoring process and are ranked separate from each other in that process. Once we decide a cut point and award LEAs, 3 campuses might be awarded the application. The LEA would have submitted an application for all 5, Excel budget worksheet for all 5. So 5 campuses times our estimated award of $100,000. They would submit an application part 2 Excel budget workbook for $500,000. If in the rank scoring, the LEA is only awarded 3 campuses, their budget would then be $300,000. During negotiation, that budget part 2 will be amended to correct all of your budget object codes to align to the actual awarded amount. Additional required submissions are your pathway supplemental attachments. On the grants opportunities page, these are called Attachment 1, Pathway 1 ESC supported VIP, Attachment 2, Pathway 2 external VIP. The supplemental attachments are both worth 45 points each, and both contain descriptions of the campus needs, individual campus needs, description of challenges to the ESF prioritized focus areas, and description of how the VIP will support the campus. Campuses will use a previously conducted ESF diagnostic or an ESF self-assessment finding to complete these attachments. We suggest that this part of the application is completed by or supported by the campus leadership and campus intervention team, because they will be the ones conducting the program once the campus is awarded. So as we've shared, an LEA may apply on behalf of its eligible campuses for either Pathway 1 or Pathway 2. A district may decide some campuses are applying for Pathway 1 and some campuses are applying for Pathway 2. An LEA does not have to choose a single pathway for all campuses and may kind of mix and match between Pathway 1 and Pathway 2. If a campus is applying for Pathway 1, their application will only include a Pathway 1 attachment and not a Pathway 2 attachment. Want to name quickly here, because this is included on the supplemental pathway attachment. Priority points are awarded to LEAs if they receive 70% of the total funds, 70% of the total points from the standard and specific criteria, that is from their application part 1 and the supplemental attachment. Priority points are identified on the supplemental pathway attachment by the campus and LEA, and those priority points will include the 2022 Campus Federal Accountability Identification, the percentage of campus identified as economically disadvantaged, the National Center for Educational Statistics campus defined either rural, town, suburban, or city, and 3+ years of academically unacceptable rating. One further required supplemental attachment is attachment 3. This is a memo of discussion. This attachment is a required part of the submission, but it is not a scored part of the submission. So there's not a score associated with this part of the submission, although it is a required submission. The memo of discussion is a requirement, as LEAs must confer with selected ESF VIPs to establish a preliminary partnership to satisfy the grant requirements. The LEA selection of a VIP at this stage during the application is reflective of intent to engage in the 23-24 school year. This memo of discussion is not a formal contract with your LEA or VIP and vice versa. The memo of discussion includes the campus names, planning on partnership with that particular VIP, VIP contact information, and a signature of that VIP. So this is a Word document, or sorry, a PDF document that has a signature box to be completed by the VIP. So as part of your process of applying for this grant program, creating a budget, and working through your narrative questions on your applications, LEAs will need to confer with this VIP to find information on what the cost associated with partnership with that VIP is, information about what the program structure will look like, and fully understand the commitments they're making when partnering with that VIP. During those conversations is the time to get this memo of discussion signed by your associated VIP. And then include that signed memo of discussion as part of your application packet. So we've named it a little bit along the way. What do I submit as part of this application? So an application packet for submission will include, as a reminder, it's a paper application, so it's not found in Teal. This is found on the Grant Opportunities webpage, and the LEA will search for the grant name in the Grant Opportunities webpage to find the all application information. So in a packet, the LEA will include an application part 1 PDF, one for the entire LEA, an application part 2 Excel workbook, one for the entire LEA, supplemental pathway attachments, one for each applicant campus for the pathway of choice, a memo of discussion, one per VIP being used. So if your LEA has 2 eligible campuses, one campus is interested in engaging with an ESC VIP, one campus is interested in engaging with an external VIP, that district's application packet will include 2 supplemental pathways, one for each campus, and 2 memo of discussions, one for the ESC VIP and one for the external VIP. So this is the entirety of the packet. As a reminder, because this is a paper application, you're submitting this application via email to the address listed below. This information is also noted on application part 1, in case you don't remember once you get there where you're supposed to send it. My recommendation is also to copy that information to your self or somebody else in your district, so you have a record of the return email. When you submit an application to this website, to this email address, you will receive a confirmation email that says, "Hello, we've received your application. Thank you for your submission." Again, this application is due by 11:59 p.m. on April 21st, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So let's talk a little bit about application scoring. Each section of the application narrative responses will be ranked and scored by members of the school improvement team, Texas instructional leadership team, and some other related staff members. On application part 1, there are several narrative responses. Each section in the narrative response receives a certain number of total points, a total number of allowable points or potential points. Summary of program has a possible points total of 20. An LEA can receive any number between 0 and 20 based on their narrative response. Goals and objective strategies performance evaluation, also worth 20 points. The LEA may receive anywhere from 0 to 20 points on that section. Budget narrative is the same, 20 points. Any awarded, any applicant LEA can receive anywhere from 0 to 20 points total on that section. So the total points possible for application part 1, which is considered standard criteria, is 60 possible points. Supplemental pathway attachments are considered specific criteria, right? Those are criteria that are specific to individual campuses and where we will see districts have maybe some very the priority points that will be assessed and assigned after the application is ranked or is scored for standard and specific criteria. Possible points for priority points include the campus federal accountability identification. If the campus is specifically comprehensive support and improvement, that campus will receive an additional 15 points. Additional targeted support and improvement campuses receive an additional 5. Economically disadvantaged campuses. Campuses with a eco-dis rate of 71 to 85% receive 5 points. Higher eco-dis rates of 86 to 100% receive 10 points. Defined as rural is also a priority for this grant program. So rural campuses receive 15 points, while city campuses will only receive 1 priority point. And then 3 years of academically unacceptable ratings. The campuses identified on this count of unacceptable performance, they'll receive an additional 15 points.
Hey, Alice, sorry to interrupt for a second. It froze for just a moment on the slide just previous to this. Would you mind just reviewing that real quickly?
Thanks, Jeff. Sure. Go back one. Hit this again. So supplemental pathway attachment is considered specific criteria. Specific criteria are individual to campus responses. So the supplemental pathway attachment that is intended to be supported and completed by campus leadership and the campus intervention team. We might see differences between one campus in an LEA and another campus in an LEA based on these responses. So description of campus needs, total possible points of 15, description of challenges to the ESF prioritized focus areas, additional 15 points, and description of how the VIP will support the campus is an additional 15 points for a total of 45. On that supplemental pathway attachment is when we'll hit these priority points, also identified by the campus and district. Once we get all the way through the process, we'll rank and score applications. So here's where the stage gates exist in moving through the application process. In step 1, the written application of standard and specific criteria by pathway are scored and then identified. So 105 total possible points are available for application part 1 and specific criteria for each individual campus. So at stage gate 1, we will identify those campuses that have received 70% of total points from specific and standard review criteria. They will only have priority points assigned if they've reached this threshold of 70% of total points. 70% of total points of 105 is 73.5 points. So an LEA and an individual campus really must receive 73.5 points baseline in order to receive priority points in addition. Priority points are 55 in total. Once they receive priority points, if they do, then applications will be ranked and scored based on those total points. I have 2 examples to kind of walk us through this so we can see what that looks like. So we have this as an example. This is Texas ISD. So the ISD has 2 eligible campuses and is applying on behalf of both. Both applications are submitted. Both campuses are submitted on a single LEA Part 1 application. So the Part 1 application is reviewed and scored. That is consistent between every campus in the district. So both campuses for application Part 1 will receive 50 points for standard criteria. That's application Part 1 data. The application then moves to the district level specific criteria on the supplemental pathway. Texas Middle School completes the application and is awarded 35 points of the total of 45 possible points. Specific criteria submission from Texas Elementary wasn't as strong, and it only received 20 points of a possible 45 points on their specific criteria. So now differentiating, Texas Middle School now has a total of 85 points. They have their 50 points from application part 1. They have their 35 points from application part 2 for a total of 85 points. Texas Middle School has met the threshold of 70% of total points. They've passed 73.5 points. That campus is awarded priority points based on their data and information. That's 35 points. And then Texas Middle School has a final score of 120 points and will be ranked according to every other applicant campus with that point number. Texas Elementary School at the bottom, who only received 20 points on their specific criteria. That's the supplemental pathway attachment for that specific campus. Their total points of 20 on specific criteria plus the district's application part 1 score of 50 only brings Texas Elementary to 70 points. They didn't meet the threshold of 70% total points of 73.3 points. So they are not eligible to receive priority points. That means that Texas Elementary is ranked at 70 points against every district and campus in the state. So in this instance, if our cut point happened to be 100 points, is where we're awarding everybody upwards of 100 points, Texas Middle would receive an award, but Texas Elementary would not. So this is an example of where the differentiation happens and why it's critical to have your district leadership support with application part 1 and your campus leadership support with application supplemental attachments for specific criteria. Let's chat a little bit about budget and use of funds. There's a few requirements, and then I want to make sure a couple of things are really clear for everyone. So there is a required budget item. We know that partnership with a VIP is a required component of this grant program. That is partnership with either the ESC or an external VIP. So those costs are a required component of this grant program. So during review and negotiation, we are expecting to see some amount budgeted in 6,200 professional and contracted services. The LEA will need to be considerate of the fact that this is a 2-year grant and partnership with the VIP is required for both years of the grant. So you're budgeting for participation in VIP in 23-24 and 24-25. If multiple focus areas for the campus are identified, the VIP participation only needs to link to one. The VIP doesn't necessarily need to support every single essential action and prioritized focus area for the campus. All other expenses outside of 6,200 must be directly linked to the essential, to the effective schools framework focus areas for the awarded campuses. Allowable use of funds, continued kind of conversations. So LEA reserve for this grant program is limited to 30%. The 30% is also limited to use of the VIP services for Title I served campuses within one level of the direct feeder pattern. So that's a kind of confusing sentence, one level of the direct feeder pattern. So that is a district determined feeder pattern. The agency doesn't determine where the feeder pattern lies within the district, but I have a few examples of that, what that means. So if a middle school in a district is awarded, any Title I served elementary that feeds into that middle school and the Title I served high school that middle school feeds into may use those LEA reserve funds for participation in the VIP. So that's one level. So the one level feeding into the awarded campuses or feeding out of the awarded campuses, either way, may use the reserve funds. Those campuses must be Title I served though. If the campus is an elementary that's awarded, the Title I served middle school would really be the only feeder up, likely, because elementary probably doesn't have a feeder down, but it could, if there's a primary version of the elementary, must also be Title I served. So level up or down, either way is the district determined feeder pattern. And again, reiteration, engagement in the VIP service is the only allowable cost for that LEA reserve of a total of 30% of the award. 30% of the total award. So I also want to reiterate this. So if a district has 2 eligible campuses, 2 awarded campuses, let me be more clear, 2 awarded campuses, their total award is $200,000. It's 30% of the total award. So 30% of 200,000 that may be reserved for use on feeder pattern campuses. So that 30% flexes depending on how many awarded campuses there are. The limitation is which which campuses that reserve can be used on based on the awarded campuses. In previous grant cycles, there was a limitation on budget object code 6100 payroll. This grant program does not have that limitation. So I just want to be clear about that as well. We also included, Division of School Improvement included a use of funds form on the grant opportunities page. This form is not a required grant application submission, so it is not intended to be included in your packet. I didn't name it on that previous slide. This form is used and should be maintained locally unless requested by TEA staff to support the LEA in justifying purchases as reasonable and necessary to carry out the grant program. We often get a lot of questions of, is this an allowable use of funds? And the district can help determine that for themselves by using this form and answering a few of those questions and maintaining that documentation locally to justify the reasonable and necessariness of a purchase. But again, not a required submission of the grant application and not required to be submitted for any purchase unless requested by the agency. So let's talk a little bit about timelines and where we're at and what you can expect coming forward. So on March 13th, we posted this grant application. It has been open now for a few weeks, 17 days. On April 21st at 11:59 p.m., this application window will close. So all emails must be received to that LOI applications email address by 11:59 p.m. on April 21st, 2023. Once grants administration collects all those, does their own quick check to make sure that campuses are eligible and verify that they have all included required submission pieces. Grant applications will be processed, scored, and ranked between April 24th and June 30th. During that time, we won't be able to provide any updates about where your application is, what the status is, any scoring information at all. We will announce awards. Our anticipated award announcement date is July 3rd. That's the first business day in July. And that will be our expected award announcement date, barring all challenges during the rank score review process. So as you're applying for this program, you are right now kind of at the end of March, middle of April, you are completing a self-assessment if you need to kind of identify LEA and campus essential actions and campus needs. You are completing the application, identifying your VIP, getting those required signatures, and submitting prior to April 21st, 11:59 p.m. In early July, we will announce awards. Once application awards are announced, that is when an LEA may begin working with their VIP. So that July date of award announcements will act as the pre-award date. So LEAs may not start encumbering costs until we announce awards for this grant program. As necessary, an ESF diagnostic will be completed in the spring of 2024 for those folks that have fallen out of that 3-year cycle. And then prior to 24-25, LEA's district charters may have an opportunity to change their VIP provider based on that diagnostic finding or a change in campus needs throughout the 23-24 school year. So we're coming to the end. We will have additional questions. I saw a few that Jeff answered in the chat. We'll have additional questions posted to the FAQ as soon as possible following this webinar. But I'm happy to answer a few live ones. I see that there's a few in the Q&A that I can jump to, but please feel free to drop those in the chat or sorry, in the Q&A so that I can help answer those.